Hi everyone, welcome to week 5. It's great to be with you. Thought I would put another video out this week. Hopefully you have begun work on your paper, picking a position and describing that. Please look at each piece of the assignment and make sure you fulfill that in your paper, because that's how the rubric works. Look at the rubric as well. Make sure you address that. I sent an APA template, loaded that I believe, for all of you. Feel free to use that if you find it valuable. It is already set up for you. So no reason to reinvent the wheel. And I'll apologize. I've been suffering from an infection the last 2-3 weeks, but I am getting over it, but that has affected my voice a little bit today. In addition, thanks for a great discussion. I will have grades out by Wednesday or Thursday of this week. I'd really like to have them done tomorrow to get that back as quickly as possible to you. Again, if you have any questions at all, please reach out to me. I'm available for office hours. I've considered putting together a meet session for us to talk and discuss. It's not actually part of the curriculum of this course. So let me know what you think about that. I know that you have busy lives, and I want to be respectful of that, and that you also have quite a bit going on, probably with another class at the same time. I promised you that I would take the next couple of weeks and talk about different leadership structures from my experience in higher education. And there's quite a body of knowledge and research out there on this if you take a look. But I thought today we'd talk about the private institution. Private institutions for hundreds and hundreds of years, going back all the way to the Middle Ages, were really created in cities, towns, regions to educate the elite. And if we fast forward to today, that's a very different system, and educated around religion or a set of beliefs at that time, and a common set of understanding or common sense around what was known at that time. The academic freedom that we have today and the university structure that we have today is changing dramatically. And it is discontinuous change, which is extremely disruptive and happens quickly. But within private institutions, let's talk about within the United States. Started very similar here. Many are faith-based, based on denominations, or were, and were started based on regions or towns or cities or counties to help support and educate the best and the brightest in that area. As time has evolved, we have what we call in the United States a nonprofit structure for private institutions. They can be not necessarily a charitable organization, but what is by tax definition a 501(c)(3). And that is simply stating that you have registered yourself with the state and with the federal government, as and approved based on a mission that has been created for that tax document. That could be as broad as educating the broadest constituent of learners. And then you can operate that entity within that. As long as those pieces are supportive of that, then they are most likely tax-free and for the benefit of the community. Some things to think about with structures and perhaps differences to compare and contrast. Within private higher education, you do not receive subventions, and that means tax money from the state to support your operations. In many states, students can attend a private school and receive some sort of scholarship, grant, or financial aid from the state level. I'm familiar with Ohio and Michigan and several other states that have something like that. And meaning, if you take a look at the price structures for private education versus state, you'll notice that they are, in many cases, private, double what the state institutions are. But if you look deeply, the discounting structure for private institutions is around on average nationwide 51 to 52%, bringing that in line. From a president council, many of the positions are the same between private and public institutions. Private institutions have a president. That president reports to the board, is hired by the board, and then has chief executive operating authority for the organization. And there can be a whole series of vice presidents. You can have a chief academic officer. You typically have somebody who's in charge of enrollment and admissions. You typically have somebody who is in charge of IT. That can report up through many different areas. You typically have somebody, the chief academic officer or provost or senior vice president of academic affairs. That name will vary. You typically have somebody who is responsible for HR, operations, things like plant, security. And then you have a director level across the organization. And that can be as big, because the private organizations can be very large and rival state institutions, or they can be very, very small. And those people can wear many different hats. And some of you work in higher ed, and so you completely understand what I'm talking about. The most important difference is the tax dollars that are not received from the state. And the second is there can be a benefit to that. So when you look at your organizational structure, if you are a state institution, you are beholden to the state academic authorities. Every state has them. And they have them for preparatory schools, and they also have them for what we would consider just typical higher education and state. But if it is the state, they are involved in, perhaps directly involved in the academic offerings. And what I mean by that is that, for example, within the state of Ohio, the state mandates certain transfer credit and that certain courses are equivalent. And this is their transfer assurance guide. And there's a process that each school must adhere to in those regulations. At a private school, such as Franklin, we do not need to adhere to those specifically. In some cases, we want to, and we do. So that was just a quick kind of overview. A board is required as a taxed entity, or a nonprofit, an untaxed entity. So as you think about, and hopefully you've picked the position that you're researching, there are a wide variety out there and available to pick from. If you haven't picked one, or if you have a question, or you have a concern, or you're not able to, please reach out to me and I'll be of assistance. Next week, I'm going to talk about state structures a little more. They're more complex than private. Obviously, in private, we have a lot more leeway. And then also a talk between the difference, perhaps, with for-profit institutions of higher education. So again, any questions, reach out to me. Appreciate your work, and I'll see you in the discussions.